Welcome to episode 6 of A Pint of Scotch, where the whiskey is aged, the beer is fresh, and the ideas are cutting edge. In each episode, us three spirit aficionados, who also happen to be industry leaders, are going to share our thoughts, ideas, and sometimes fuel-induced rants on leadership, empathy, people, technology, and culture. I'm JT Perry, and I will be this episode's moderator. I am joined today by my close friends and industry leaders, Brian Ross and Gotham Palapa. Welcome again, guys. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Ross. As you probably hear from the accent, I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland. I've had the benefit of many different roles in IT. So I've been an engineer, been a team leader, I've been director level, and now I'm back to being an individual contributor where I'm helping other companies with their challenges based on some of my experience. So I've had the benefit of working in different industries with lots of different people. So hopefully I can bring some of that to today's episode.
Gotham?
I'm Gautam Palapa. I'm a modernization expert, and I have over 20 years of experience, like these two fine folks, driving enterprise transformations with cloud-native apps, data engineering, DevOps, and AI. My passion is elevating human quality of life by infusing empathic leadership and tech innovation into the DNA of organizational cultures and helping enterprises achieve their business outcomes.
And I also have over 20 years of experience as both a developer, also on the infrastructure side, but most of my time in technology and business leadership, whether it's M&A, launching new lines of business, transformation, all of those kind of fun things. So let's jump into our topic for today. And today it's, a topic that's as old as, frankly, I think employment itself. And one that I'm hearing discussed more and more, whether it's live conversations with friends and customers, conference hallway tracks. I think, and that's really a communication, right? How are organizations doing that communication? The good and bad, frankly. The past 6 to 12 months, right? I think what kind of started to hear referred to as the tech winter, with all the significant layoffs, M&A reductions that result from that, the return to office or not return to office or mandated return to office, product pivots, AI, all of those kind of things have really shown the importance of communication within organizations. Frankly, I think it's also highlighted organizations and specific leaders that are good at it and those that could use some work on it as well. We wanted to dive in and share our experiences, good and bad, as well as share maybe some recommendations, tips, tricks on hopefully how you can do it better as a leader for those of you in those roles. And those of you not in those roles, what you should expect of your leaders. Communication is critical to building trust. We've all heard the trope that our team is like a family. I hope you've also heard that can be dangerous, right? Family members, generally, I'm sure we can all come up with exceptions, don't lay each other off, don't give performance reviews, although my mother likes to review my performance still to this day. But generally, it's not a good example. But it is possible to establish a very deep level of trust, a friendship, kind of that esprit de corps. You definitely want that. Right? You absolutely can get everyone to work together for the greater cause or mission, even when bad connotations come around, right? Even when there's layoffs, mergers can be exciting, they can be stressful, they can have negative and other events. But we do know that communication is hard. You have to be very deliberate about it. It takes work and time. So let's start off and talk about some example where things have gone really well. Gotham, can you share an example of good, solid communication and the effect you saw on a team?
Yeah, sure. Before I jump into the example, which probably will address the acquisitions, because you referenced the tech winter and all the various changes that have been happening since 2023, I do want to say that trope about companies being like families is something that I do not relate to. It really irks me because companies are not families. What they are actually tribes. So we join a company and we are part of that tribe because we align to maybe the philosophy of that particular company or maybe the purpose of that company. And as a tribe, if you don't align with it, both the tribe leaders or the people in the tribe can either leave or be left behind if they don't contribute to the value of the tribe. And so I like to call it more of a tribe rather than a family, but I have heard a lot about it being a family, and I totally agree. You cannot unfamily someone if they're truly a family, but here we are. So, anyways, off my soapbox, let me share an example from my tenure as a CTO at a global organization, where I firmly believe that effective communication was pivotal to success. So we had acquired a rapidly growing company in a different geography to expand our product offerings and enter new markets. And this acquired team, even though it was highly talented, understandably was anxious about their future, their job security, and their fit within our larger organizational structure. So as the CTO, my goal was to integrate these teams, the product portfolios, and technology smoothly while trying to minimize attrition, reduce anxiety, maintain high morale, while also ensuring that our current product development remained on track. And then what I also wanted to do was extend our company's culture of trust, our innovation, and psychological safety to this acquired company. So this is where I firmly believe that clear and empathic communication comes in handy. So what I did is I instituted 3 key actions. The first thing is I held comprehensive and transparent town halls where I clearly and unambiguously articulated the why behind the acquisition. That is one of the most fundamental things we want to say. We're not acquiring people because of the technology. We're acquiring companies because of the people and the talent and the value that they bring. So I explained a vision for the future, how they are strategically important through this acquisition, emphasizing how their unique values are going to be crucial to achieving our goals. And then from a place of empathic leadership, I shared personal anecdotes and stories, like having been a developer, having been acquired myself, expressing my fears and saying, these are realities and this is what we're going to face, but we're going to work through it together. So I made sure that we were empathically connecting on an emotional level by demonstrating my vulnerability. And I believe this approach fostered a sense of purpose and belonging, and it helped alleviate some of their fears. Next, we created an internal dedicated communication platform to share this honest, regular updates about the integration process. So I created a safe space for people to be themselves and express their fears. So this platform was accessible to all employees. It featured detailed timelines, FAQs, updates about what to expect. We shared weekly progress reports, upcoming milestones, even video messages from leadership addressing some common concerns. So by providing this consistent, transparent information, we aim to eliminate any rumors and build that trust. And additionally, we included success stories from past integration, highlighted individual contributors to build that sense of community and achievement. And then thirdly, and I think this is where we need to spend a lot of time as leaders, is prioritizing face-to-face meetings with the company's team. So I travel to those offices, I spend time listening to their concerns, addressing their questions, and showing them that their contributions are valued. So when you're acquiring a company, and as a leader, if you're going and spending days on end with the teams, they appreciate the value that they are bringing to the company. And it's not just an acquisition, it is more of an integration of culture. And so this emphasizes the culture of trust, innovation, and psychological safety, and encourages them to feel much more positive about the things that are coming down the path. And honestly, these were really simple things that we did, but the impact of this was remarkable. Within 6 months, our employee engagement scores improved by 32%, and we maintained a retention rate of over 87% among the acquired team members. Additionally, the consolidated team, they accelerated product development, they raised and integrated with our teams, and resulted in a 28% increase in our project completion rate. So by the end of that integration process, our combined efforts led to the successful launch of, I want to say, 3 new products, which significantly boosted our market position in a new market. And so underscores that communication isn't just about disseminating information and checking a box. It's about fostering an environment of trust and inclusion. Effective leadership communication should be rooted in empathy and transparency, and it can transform uncertainty into a shared mission. It's not a communication strategy. This is not a playbook that leaders have to do. It's an imperative. This is what we have to do, and as a leader, if you're not genuinely doing it and being authentic about it, you are just, running a playbook and you're never going to get value out of it.
Brian, any thoughts?
I was thinking of my examples of good communication, and nothing sprung to mind, and that in itself is interesting. It's not that I've not got good examples, it's that those examples happened without any drama. And I think that's the difference between a good and bad conversation with people. If you can get across your point and you can do it in a way that people feel involved and they, as you say, you're showing some vulnerability, you are being human, you're being empathetic in your approach. This isn't about getting what you want. It's not about exercising corporate transformation. It's about treating people as human beings with respect and dignity. And I think that's what people relate to. So when I think about great examples of leadership, the types that I've tried to emulate throughout my career, it's where they've been able to get across their passion for something. So it feels like they've got an honest passion for what they're trying to do. They have demonstrated really clear thinking. They're very specific about what they want to achieve, why they want to do it, and how they think they're going to get there. But they also make space for others to contribute. It's not a done deal. There's an opportunity for everyone to be part of it and to play their role. So I think that's that's just a very human way of approaching it. But I think above all else, they don't pretend to have all the answers, right? I think this is the one thing that I learned very early on, is that a manager is not some kind of superhero. A manager is just another human being that's just in a different role, trying to do their best, just like everybody else. Much like all the way up to your CEO, they have many of the same problems, they have many of the same challenges, and they have bad Mondays just like you do. Again, everyone's human. So I think with good communication, it's about dropping some of the corporate strategy for a little minute and just really thinking about how we engage on a personal level.
I think that's spot on. Like my great experience was for, I don't know, not great reason, frankly. Was one of two leaders of a startup called ASI. We were purchased by a large company, Assurant Employee Benefits. An incredible hat tip to them and that organization. Now this was a case, Gotham, you talked about doing an acquisition for because the talent was super valuable and all of that. And not that ASI's talent wasn't incredible, but there were some real structural reasons why they frankly just wanted the technology and the block of the business. And so they were going to choose to, frankly, lay us all off. Now, I think, and hat tip to Amy Thompson, I will name drop her, who led a lot of the messaging and communication and just knocked this out of the park. Look, could have gone on with the acquisition and waited until a month before kind of D-Day, so to speak, or whatever, and dropped the news. They leaned in almost, 9 months, maybe almost a year ahead of time. Leveraged myself as a local leader, frankly, to stand up in front of everybody and said, hey, we're going to acquire the company. Here are some reasons. You may not agree with them, frankly, but all of your jobs will terminate. And here is kind of how we're going to do that. At the end of the day, I remember as everybody walked out of the back of this auditorium that we gave this announcement, they had a packet for everybody with kind of, here's what we know. The document I remember more about that packet was, here's what we don't yet know, and here's when we think we're going to know it. That was also incredibly valuable. But looked to and trusted these people to run the organization, right? There were significant end consumers of these products, right? Insurance products. So important. But trusted these humans to do the right thing and stay engaged and continue to effectively do their job for the next 9 months or year, whatever that period was. Very frequent communication, all hands standing up. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. That kind of stuff. And as people left, and they left in waves along that, with really one, exception that leaps out to me, but just probably a couple other handfuls, people left with a smile and said thank you. And I don't want to pretend they liked losing their job, that they didn't do that. But all of our metrics, all of our, answering phone calls in certain amount of times or getting enrollments done in certain amount of times, all of those met or exceeded those metrics all the way through. And I would say it was a happy place to work. It wasn't like working in a funeral home, which frankly I was worried about, right? For 9 months, would it be this kind of endless goodbye, right? And it wasn't. And many of those people, we still talk and work to today. So, just that point that it doesn't always have to be, good communication doesn't just mean good news, right? It can be bad news, but also be effective about being early, trusting the people. That was the biggest thing, right? Not pretending that boy, we have to tell them and close all their accounts right away and remove all their access or anything like that.
That is
Um,
such a wholesome story, JT. And if I may also make an observation there were two things that I think they did in addition to the trust and the communication. One is they tried to reduce the insecurity and the unknown by actually publishing and telling them up front the things that they don't know, accepting vulnerability and saying, hey, we're in it together, but we will work through it. And providing maybe a kind of a timeline or an aspirational timeline on when they can get it. So that really helped employees or people who could potentially have been let go to feel a little more calmer about it and have their own runway. The next
yeah,
thing is I love the fact that they treated everyone with respect. And this is something that I think we're doing really bad over the last year. I personally feel this way. I mean, I'm in the Bay Area, and I see day in and day out the disrespectful way that people are being either let go or communicated about being let go. That is dehumanizing us, and we probably need to stop doing that. So I love this story because it's so wholesome and is an exemplar of how to do things the right way.
yeah, and it's not without risk, right? There was a opportunity that somebody could have, checked out, told the customer to go to hell, like whatever crazy stories you want to come up with, but they didn't. And there were things we did, right, as far as monitoring and stuff like that. And it wasn't overly big brothers, but there are like legal due diligence things you need to do as an executive to say, hey, like any other part of normal enterprise risk management, we now have a risk. Let's manage it, right? And we did do that, but it largely was not largely, I will say, it was an incredibly successful transition all the way around, right? Even customers that we talked to, we had customers that were insurance companies as well as consumers, but talking to customers of insurance companies, they didn't really detect that this was going on, even though they knew about it as well. So again, it can be done. It was an incredible, proud moment. And at the risk of running on about it for another 10 minutes, let me shift us here a little bit. We talk about the good communication. You can throw all of that out, right? With one poorly communicated event. It doesn't mean one sentence or one email. You can always come back from those kind of things. But thinking about an entire event, a layoff, a merger, whatever that case may be, and suddenly, right, as a leader, you look around and all the star players have left, whether or not they've resigned and left, or they've done the quiet quitting thing and they're there but in like physical form only. Let's kind of talk about the experiences that have gone bad, right? Because it doesn't always go well. Brian, can you talk about maybe a spot where communication went sideways and hurt the team?
Do you know, I think, again, I'll talk kind of generally. And you mentioned this earlier, and it's return to office. And I found this really interesting. It's possibly the most obvious example of bad communication. And I say this because, like, we all remember COVID and lockdown and everything that happened there. And I appreciate that not everyone will have the same experiences, but in general, what I saw was positive communication. Like, COVID was a massive change, lots of sacrifices made by lots of people having to suddenly jump in and do work that's not part of their contract or work different hours. Or on the other side, people had new life changes happening that we had to try and support. So the level of change was huge, right? But yet the purpose was incredibly clear. We all understood why we had to make this change. Even if all the information was unreliable and the challenges came thick and fast and 1 week was different from the next, we all stuck in there. We all worked together. We all felt like we were in it together. Return to office, though. That's going to be interesting, right? So we now have the same businesses that asked their employees very nicely to all work from home. We changed our home setups. We had desks and cameras and things set up. We stopped going to offices. We made changes, alterations, and we did that for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, we get emails asking for people to come back into the office. And I think the problem is, I think for many, nobody can understand why. So from their perspective, they've worked from home now for a couple of years. It's been broadly successful for them. Why do we need to change? And I think when companies try and make a change and try and explain why they need to come back, no one quite understands it. Well, it's because we're more productive. But then those people will then pull out some kind of survey that says, well, actually, work from home is more productive. Or it's about moments of magic. But then we can't have moments of magic if we're not all in the office together. So if we're going to be in the office, we need to have the team together, right? If we're going to have these communications and serendipity. If we're returning to office 1 or 2 days a week on some kind of arbitrary schedule, that doesn't work. So the logic of this argument breaks down. And I think companies then made the mistake of trying to coerce people back into the office. Well, actually, we're going to do free breakfasts, or we're going to do some events, or we're revamping the office, or we're going to give you better computers. Whatever it is, there was some kind of gimmick to try and get them back in the office. The carrot, if you like. And then now, more recently, we see the stick. You'll come back in the office because it's in your contract, or else. And of course, that works. That will work. The majority of people will end up having to go back in the office for the 1 or 2 days. And my family is no different. My wife is having to go into the office. I must say, I'm very fortunate. My company's 100% remote. But I think the thing for me is that the mistake that companies are making is that you can force people for a short period to do things through carrot and stick. But that doesn't work in the grand scheme. You can't force people to be curious, to be creative, to be innovative. And if you end up with a workforce that is there because they were coerced or because they're forced, it's not going to be a workforce that's going to do well. So I think that return to office is an area where I don't think many people understand why. I don't think many people understand the logic about how it's going to work. And I think that as a result, it's going to harm businesses.
And I think a lot of it's been done too without an awareness or taking into account the impact on people's home lives, right? Whether they're parents or not parents, whether they're married or have a partner or not, right? They've kind of reconfigured their lives, right, to work in a certain way. And without diving too far down on the RTO actual topic, the communication about bringing them back has been, as far as I can see, and I'm sure there are good examples out there. To your point earlier, we don't hear about the good ones; we only hear about the bad ones, right? But totally lacking in that compartment. And I think if you're going to get to a point where you have to use the stick, right? It's in your contract, come back or else. That, to your point, that works for, I don't know what the timeline is, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. But you as a leader better use those 3 months and 6 months to demonstrate why that's better for that employee, not just the company. It should benefit the company. I hope it benefits the company, and you should talk about that as well. But why that employee is more successful for being there, other than I'm only going to promote you if you're in the office. Well, okay, that's just another stick. That's not actually a carrot. It's a stick you painted orange, those kind of things. But I think demonstrating an empathy, how are you going to help them with their lives and restructuring their lives? Are you going to give them a ramp to get there? But then also once they're back, demonstrating that it's been effective and a good thing for them as well.
That's the funny thing, right? Because humans generally do enjoy meeting each other. So it should be easy, but it's because it's been wrapped in a way that it feels like someone else has something to gain from this, and those involved, those making the change, those making the sacrifice, don't have something to gain too. It doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel just. And the logic behind it doesn't make sense. So yes, I think it's a really interesting example of just how you talk to people can just change that lens. As you say, is it just a stick painted orange? I will be stealing that and claiming it as my own from
I
now on.
love that. I love that thing. I'm stealing it too. I also feel like, especially for people who are coercing them, the people who come and show up, they'll probably do it with malicious intent. you are not going to get the level of productivity that you would get if you convince people to actually come or try to understand the amount of friction that you are inducing by demanding them to come into the office. So there's a lot of conversations to be had, but I love that thick painted orange. I'm gonna use that as well. It's a fun visual.
Gotham, do you have any stories about beyond RTO about things that haven't gone as well as it could have?
Okay, how much time do you have?
Go, man, go.
So I'm not going to talk about some of the more public ones where we've heard about people going on Zoom and firing a bunch of people or using ChatGPT to create some kind of boilerplate communication to fire a bunch of folks or some public apology crap. So I'm not going to deal with those things because those are very common and they keep circulating a lot. What I'm probably going to talk about is something that's personal to me. So this happened recently when I was an executive advisor and I witnessed a major restructuring that has gone horribly wrong. And I know I can talk about it for hours, but I'm going to talk about 3 critical missteps that this company's leadership made in their communication approach. The first one, which I feel is most critical, is the leaders failed to engage with key stakeholders and team members early on in the process. They've shared stories where things can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be all bad. If you communicate and keep people involved, then they are going to understand the reasoning behind it because people are logical. They're not really that emotional creatures as we make them be. The restructuring that we went through here was planned behind closed doors with no input or feedback from those that would have been most effective. And it was performed in a very apathetic and clinical manner. And so when the announcement finally came out, it was a complete surprise to a bunch of people. It caused shock and confusion. Conspiracy theories floated around. Sentiments like they survived because they were part of the good old boy network, or they brown-nosed themselves successfully. Or my favorite one is the reason they survived is because they were part of the restructuring effort. And so these kinds of things and these sentiments really hurt the organization, the morale of the people. And unfortunately, we see this occur several times over the last few years. So I believe that's the first one that really impacted. The second thing is different departments received varying levels of information, which led to inconsistent messaging. Some teams were briefed in detail. Some people were informed before the restructuring announcement went out, while some people were left with scant information or nothing at all. And they were like, in the face of it. Remember the Google story where they laid off a bunch of people and they didn't even know whether they were employed or not until that patch didn't work? So this was very similar to that. This inconsistency created a sense of inequity, and it fueled distrust among the employers. And then we've talked about this a little bit, especially with the RTO stuff, but leadership did not acknowledge, and I still believe they don't understand the emotional impact of this restructuring. There was a huge lack of understanding about how change can push employees out of their comfort zones into discomfort or even panic zones. And this failure to address the stress and anxiety, it led to heightened fears and insecurities. And that is a situation where even good employees who who survive the restructuring, they're going to leave because they see their camaraderie and the relationships leave the building and not being treated with respect. And so that experience, it underscores the poor communication, which can be detrimental, leading to disengagement, decreased morale, and increased turnover. Communication shouldn't be just about sharing information. And we've talked about it a couple of times here. It's about building trust. It's about providing clarity, showing empathy, and treating people as people with respect. And that, I think, when the leadership communication is neglected, it can turn potential opportunities into significant setbacks. And it's a powerful reminder that leaders must prioritize clear, transparent, and empathic communication to guide their teams through change successfully. So that's one example. I can obviously go into more details. Obviously, it's kind of personal to me, but I think these are three of the main things where it could have been done better.
Yeah, I think the other one I would lean into is a personal example we've all, the three of us have recently experienced with the Broadcom VMware merger. Layoffs expected, probably should have been from an expense perspective and a dollar perspective. I mean, there's a philosophical and moral debate that can be had, but I think just on a spreadsheet basis, it makes sense to make some material reductions when you put the two companies together. But just the inaccuracy and the unknown. I go back to the good story of ASI and AEB, Assured Employee Benefits I talked about earlier, was sharing that timeline, right? Here's when we're going to know. Here's what we know and what we don't know. Just kind of a constant mystery. Felt like every day was a new surprise, a new shoe dropping, so to speak. And then just, I would say in general, well, yes, related to the Broadcom thing, but just in general, the information you do send, boy, make sure it's accurate, right? The details matter, and it doesn't mean you have to bat 1,000, to use a horrible baseball metaphor in the middle of this. You can make mistakes as long as you just jump on it and, wow, we messed that up. Here's what's going to happen. But sending out letters to people who were going to stay that had bosses that here's going to be your boss, but come to find out that person had been laid off, right? It just creates this mass of confusion, inability to make decisions in places you had to make decisions, and I think just caused a lot of spin for several months. Even folks that have continued on, are just kind of now starting to wade through that. And not only does it have, which I think is the most important part, a significant impact on the humans involved, right? And their families and what are they going to do and all of that kind of stuff, but also frankly on the business. When you kind of force everybody to focus internally because you're just trying to figure out, what is my job? Who do I do? Who do I report to? Who do I, right? Can I still do this? Can I still do that? All of those kind of things, you're no longer helping the customers, right? Which does impact the business as well. So not only, right, I guess is what I'm trying to get to is, not only is communication important because frankly, it's the right freaking thing to do, right? From a human perspective, but it's also really, really important to your bottom line. Right. If you're sitting up in the executive space going, I don't have time for this communication thing. I can just do this. And they can do that. You can. You absolutely can. That's a choice you can make. But it absolutely will help drive your bottom line forward in a very positive direction if you communicate well. Right. Back to, again, I'll use the ABASI where folks continued to engage and drive good customer outcomes, even when they knew they were going to be laid off, as opposed to other examples where, you might just be spinning for 3 months and 6 months and the customers are struggling as a result, frankly, from that perspective. I think we could all rant about poor examples for quite a long time, and frankly also some good examples to be fair. But I think we probably have folks listening that are leaders or aspiring leaders and want to know what they can do to build trust and communicate as well. Like, so great, you told us the good stories, you told us the bad stories, well, kind of tell me how to do this. And so tips and tricks we may have. Brian, you want to start off with things that maybe you've thought of and come up with?
Yeah, sure. We're probably summarizing much of what we've said, but I think for me there are maybe 3 or 4 key things that we need to focus on when we're trying to implement change. The first one, which we've heard time and time again, is having clear thinking about what it is you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. I have seen many changes fail because those involved get a sense that it's either corporate boredom or it's to help improve the promotion prospects for one of the execs. And that is never going to encourage other people to do their best work. So I think that people will be more engaged in things that they can understand the why behind. So be really clear about your why. In terms of engagement, I would say everyone should read Drive by Daniel Pink, where he talks about the 3 motivators behind human behavior. And those are mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So if you can tap into those, when you're making space for people to contribute, if you can tap into that, you're going to build an environment that is positive, like the one you were talking about, JT, that kind of fosters kind of enthusiasm and engagement. And ultimately, people engaged will be more successful. Whether that's a good news story or bad news story, like it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. We can do a bad thing, but still exit it happily. Like a breakup. Like there's some messy breakups and there's some amicable ones, and it's down to the individuals and their communication about how that changes. So understanding people's motivation and making space for them, I think, is the big number two. And then the last one I think I would say is what you said, Gotham. It's vulnerability. It's it's not pretending that you know everything. It's being able to explain very clearly what it is you want to change, the outcomes you think you're going to see, and how you plan to measure that. But if that doesn't work, like it's okay that you don't know all the details. It's okay that you can say, we think this will happen. But if it doesn't, we'll change the plan. And I think tied to that is that the change fundamentally has to feel honest and authentic. Nobody likes corporateness, especially if it's going to impact their lives or impact the work they do. Like we all come to work to do our best job. And I think that when you are encouraging people to change or make change on your behalf, I think it's important to really understand it from their perspective. So yeah, that would be my top three. Understand the change that you want to do and demonstrate you've thought about it from more angles than just your own. Understand how you're going to get people engaged with you using the human behaviors of mastery, autonomy, and purpose, and be iterative. Start small, build your way up, build on successes, rather than putting a 5-year change program in that's going to succeed no matter what. That still sounds very negative. You can tell this is a motive subject for everybody because we've all been there, right?
Yes,
Gotham, how about you? Handful of tips or tricks?
Sure. Because Ryan mentioned Try by Daniel Payne, which is a phenomenal book. I'm going to start with Why by Simon Sinek. That's another very important book that I would recommend you all to read because we want to communicate the purpose behind the decisions and changes clearly and consistently. People are more likely to trust and follow a leader when they understand the reasoning and the larger vision. We are all adults. We need to treat people as adults. And so when you start treating people like adults and respecting them and their thought processes and creating an area where they can talk about these things, it fosters a sense of belonging and alignment with the organizational goals. I also say that there's another book, Leaders Always Eat Last, by Simon Sinek. So you can read that as well. That's another good one. I would say be consistently transparent. That is something that we don't do. We pick and choose at times. And obviously, because some of us might be uncomfortable to have critical conversations, or maybe we don't like to have confrontations. Don't do that. As a leader, you need to push yourself into a discomfort zone and be consistently transparent, because transparency is the bedrock of trust. Regularly update your teams with honest, clear information about what's happening, be it good or bad. Even if the news isn't all positive, they will appreciate it. And definitely try not to do, what is that? Jack Welch and the shit sandwich thing, where you have good news and then you have bad news and then good news at the end of it. Like, please don't do that. That is terrible. So if you have that consistent transparency, it will reduce rumors and it will build that credibility. The third thing, which I find interesting that we as humans don't really do a lot, is to listen actively and empathically. Effective communication is just not about speaking and sending emails and publishing things and having newsletters and press releases. It's about listening. Make time to actively listen to your team's concerns and feedbacks. It not only shows that you value their input, but also helps you address issues before they escalate. So listen more than you speak. That is something that I would say. And then lastly, because we touched upon this and I started on a rant, I want to end with this rant. Language matters. So if you are using the word family in your organization, try to stop doing that. We are not families. We want to use the right language and express things in the right way, because a lot of humans use that to shape the way that they build their relationship with the community that they're working with. Use it like a tribe, use it as a community, but please, for heaven's sake, don't say family. That's all I have.
handful of tips. Those are all great. A handful of tips I've come up with, learned from, again, Amy Thompson, Carla Schott, who's another friend and incredible mentor in this space. I have to find a way to get them published, I think, right? In addition to the books you have. I think the most obvious is to just do it. And I don't mean that in a Nike response, but silence is communication, right? A vacuum is the worst possible choice. And you have to do it before the event, right? The first time you communicate can't be because a merger is happening. So hopefully you're doing this communication, good news, happy news, bad news, not so great news, quarterly results, whatever the case is, you've been doing it all along. My close second, I think Gotham, you hit on this a little bit too, is tell the truth. Like as much, and I hate to put this caveat in, is legally able, because there are legal and restraints, communicate what you can, but never lie, right? There's no regulatory reason you have to lie. There may be a regulatory reason you can't answer the question, and you can say that, like, I'm not in a place to answer that question right now. Is that awkward? Are people going to read into it? Yes, and I don't mean that you should be laying breadcrumbs, but there will be constraints, but you can never lie. Once you lie, everything after that, right, is up to question. Take the time to plan this communication. I can think of, like, I cannot think of many examples, maybe one or two, that there would be a reason where you just have to do this off the cuff, right? There is always a chance to take a couple days, a week, put the communication plan together. It might be a simple spreadsheet of Sally's going to go tell Fred, JT is going to go tell Gotham, right? And roughly here's what the messages are. Thinking through that will help you be much more empathetic. Think about impacts. We can't tell Brian before we tell Gotham, because what about this, right? And you can also tie yourself in knots with that, but at least thinking through that exercise will make you super effective, I think. Communicate the timeline as well. I talked about that in the previous example. Here's what we know today. Here's what we don't know. Here's when we think we're going to know it. And yep, you know what? Some of those dates are going to change too as we get closer, and we'll communicate it, right, as we get there. Talking points. I think this has a bad connotation, boy, especially in the political realm here in the United States, right? The phrase talking points. But I think maybe instead of talking points, think about it as information. Arming, if you're a senior leader, arming your frontline managers with kind of some key messages really helps, because that customer service rep, that junior developer isn't going to come to you as a senior executive. Like, you wish they would, but they're not. They're going to go to that person they interact with day-to-day basis, that manager. And making sure that manager's credibility is maintained whole, like the manager will feel much better too if they have something to give. And again, it's not going to be holistic. It's not going to be all of it, but hey, the reason the company elected this is yes. And if you're that manager, telling them that, you know what, this is the talking point I received, I'm learning information like you are, that's also okay. Maintain your credibility, but it all does really help. We talked about I don't know. And then the last one I'll say is, as a senior leader, this is an area to hold your more junior leaders accountable and to mentor your junior leaders and help them understand how to do this better. It's a skill like everything else, like learning to develop, like learning to project manage, to learn to budget, all of those things. As leadership, communication is a really big skill. We've gone long because this is a topic that's super passionate and important to us. Anything either of you want to say before we wrap this up?
Something just came to my mind when you were talking about this, JT. I'm going to say only one thing, and I'm going to keep it brief. We are inevitably going to screw up in some way, shape, or form with this communication. Things are going to fall through the cracks. We're going to make mistakes. The important thing to do as a leader is to admit that mistake, say what we can do better, and then acknowledge it and say this is the impact and how we're going to put countermeasures. A lot of people don't do that, and I think that is a detriment to the communication itself. Accept you're human, we screw up, we're going to get better, but we're going to get better together.
Another one that jumped to mind, and again, we could drag this on forever, we should wrap it up, but is lean into the tough questions. You're going to get aggressive conversations, pointed, maybe even personally attacking. Lean into them without, like, don't punch back by any means. Please don't punch back. But answering the tough questions will give you credibility all the way through, right? If you only answer the easy ones and deflect the hard ones, boy, that's pretty easy to figure out pretty quick, right? Sometimes the answer is I don't know, and lean into that as well. Brian, any thoughts?
So I think we've talked pretty much everything. There's only one thing I don't think we've mentioned, and that is that if you have a change that you're trying to make happen, I think as a leader, it's really important to say what you are going to do. What does this change mean for you? So yes, we want other people to do this, that, the next thing, but what are you doing? And I think that leading from the front is often a really good way of building your credibility. So even if that is return to work, for example, you're going to need to return to work. You need to set an example.
All right. With that, let's wrap up this episode of A Pint of Scotch. I think one of our more passionate and I need to be a part of, for sure. Let me try to summarize what we've discussed today. I think we talked about communication as the number one attribute that really will determine your team's success and their level of engagement. I'm going to say without argument. I'm sure somebody could come up with some argument, but it'll make or break your ability to deliver on your company's mission. The old cliche of people leave managers or leaders, not companies, is frankly a direct result of the communication that is or isn't present. Back to silence as communication as well, right? We shared a handful of stories of what went well and not so good. We also shared a number of tips and tricks that I hope everybody can take away. I'll come back to I think the most important one is to actually communicate. If you walk away with nothing else, it's communicate. Do what you can do. Be honest and sincere. Share everything you can. Your people, your team has to know that you'll never mislead or lie to them. And as a senior leader, make sure you arm your team with, frankly, books. We talked about a handful of books, and we'll drop them in the show notes that can help mentor your junior leaders in this space, but also hold them accountable. Expect them to communicate as you are communicating as well. Hey, so thanks everybody for joining us. As always, please share your thoughts and stories with us on social media or in the comment sections. Like and review, all those good fun things. That helps us out as well. And again, remember, whether it's technology, empathetic leadership, or the beverage that you're currently on, it's the depth and the flavor of the journey that counts. Communication as well, right? Always make time to savor the wisdom one sip at a time. Until next time, raise your glasses high and cheers to the stories yet to be told. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.